Owners of dogs will have noticed that if you provide them with food and water and shelter and affection, they will think that you are God. Whereas owners of cats are compelled to realize that if you provide them with food and water and affection, they draw the conclusion that they are God. According to the internet, this is a Christopher Hitchens quote from The Portable Atheist. But I encountered this quote long ago from some other source, and I added it to my list of quotes that I keep. For reference, I've been keeping a list of quotes since I was 16, which is 10 years ago now, and I'm currently on number 711. This quote on my list is at number 90. I encountered this quote, I would say about 8 years ago or so, and since then I've had a theory stemming from it. Now, since I haven't read The Portable Atheist, it's entirely possible that Christopher Hitchens goes on to theorize exactly the same thing I'm about to, and I'm essentially reinventing the wheel here without realizing it. If that is the case, you'll have to forgive me. But whether or not this theory truly derives from me is kind of irrelevant, because it's just the theory itself that's the interesting thing. So, why do some people prefer dogs over cats? Why do other people prefer cats over dogs? The root of the theory that I'm about to lay out is the assumption, or maybe the observation, that dog people like dogs because they share more personality traits with dogs than they do with cats, and vice versa for cat people. You like dogs because you're like a dog, in some ways at least, or a dog is like you. You like cats because you're like a cat in some ways, or a cat is like you. Thinking about dogs versus cats, what traits define their personalities? Dogs, typically, are much more dependent than cats. Dogs seek your affection and your attention. It seems they are dependent on you for happiness. If you're not around, they're sad. If you are around, they're happy. Whereas cats, generally speaking, don't care as much. Of course, most cats like attention, but they don't seem to need it very much. They're perfectly content to be left alone. They can provide their own source of happiness. Additionally, because of the fact that dogs have been domesticated over the past several thousand years for this purpose, and cats have basically not been domesticated at all, a personality trait common to most dogs is obeisance, or servitude. They do things for you. Cats, on the other hand, don't really do anything for you. In many ways, if you own a cat, it can actually feel like the cat is your master. You feed it and you clean up its shit, and it just ignores you, or at the very least acts like it's better than you. Whereas with a dog, you still have to feed it and clean up its shit, but you also tell it what to do, and it's basically your little sad fur slave. As the quote at the beginning of this video suggests, dogs seem to look for external guidance and authority, whereas cats look internally for these things. And so my hypothesis is that dog people also look externally, and cat people look internally. So then the prediction is that dog people will be more likely to believe in God, and cat people will be less likely to believe in God, based off of the assumption that people have similar attitudes to that of their pets, which of course could be wrong. So I call it the God/dog theory, and it's just a nice coincidence that dog spells God backwards. This theory is not predicting that every individual dog person believes in God and that every individual cat person doesn't believe in God. That's very easy to disprove. Just find a dog person who doesn't believe in God and find a cat person who does, there you go. And I've already done that, and I'm sure you have too. No, this theory is predicting likelihood of belief. It's about populations of people, and any prediction that you could make about individuals would be probabilistic ones. I've been testing this theory out ever since I first came up with it. This has by no means been a scientifically, methodologically rigorous survey, and I haven't really been recording my data aside from just remembering it. But I do still have a small amount of data to back up my hypothesis. Whenever I meet people, often coworkers, I start off by asking them two questions. The first is, are you more of a cat person or more of a dog person? The second is, do you believe in God / are you religious? Of all the people I've asked so far, I'd say that around 70 to 80% of their answers have lined up with my hypothesis, which would certainly make it statistically significant. Of course, this isn't the most reliable data for the reasons I just mentioned, so at some point in the future I would like to conduct a more rigorous survey. But I encourage you to ask the people that you know these two questions and report back with how many of them align with this theory. Of course, not everyone can be easily put into buckets of dog person or cat person. Some people like them both pretty much equally. Some people don't really like either. Some people prefer lizards. Whatever. So maybe change the question from are you more of a cat person or a dog person to if you had to own one pet and that pet had to either be a cat or a dog, which would you choose? Or you could just leave anyone who doesn't want to put themselves into one of these two buckets out of the data set. Or record their answers anyway. Perhaps the people that refuse to decide are more likely to refuse to decide on matters of God belief as well. Who knows? Maybe they've got higher chances of being agnostics. While my gathering of data wasn't scientifically rigorous, the theory itself is scientific. It's based on observations from the real world. It makes testable predictions that a dog person is likely to believe in God and that a cat person is not. So based on my theory, I would be willing to bet that you don't believe in God if all I know about you is that you're a cat person. It's falsifiable. If you conduct the survey and find out that, say, dog people are actually less likely to believe in God, or that there is no statistically significant correlation. And it's verifiable if you conduct the survey and find out that the correlation does exist. This theory makes two predictions. One, that dog people are likely to believe in God, and two, that cat people are not likely to believe in God. But these predictions could be entirely separate. One could turn out to be true and the other could turn out to not be. For instance, preferring dogs could be an indicator of God belief, but preferring cats could be completely unrelated to God belief. Or the other way around. From my relatively small sample size of around 120 people, I think they're both correlated, at least as of right now. To know for sure, I would need more data. And of course, if it turned out that both predictions weren't true, then I would have to scrap my theory entirely. So based off the casual research that I've done on this theory with my interactions with people over the past 8 years, there seems to be some correlation. And it's important to note that it is just a correlation, not causation. And really, it's only a possible correlation. I'm not saying that preferring dogs causes people to believe in God, or that believing in God causes people to prefer dogs. It's just that preferring dogs is a possible indicator of God belief. It could be that one causes the other, but you can't learn that just by asking these two questions. If you wanted to test the theory behind the correlation, you could ask people why they prefer dogs and cats. But you'd have to take what people say with a massive grain of salt, because people are fantastic confabulators. It's not that they're knowingly making up a bullshit answer, but people don't really know the reasons for why they like things. So they think of some plausible explanation that to them feels authentic. If they tell you a reason for why they like something, is that really the reason? How much of our preference selection is subconscious or unconscious? I would guess that almost all of it is. When you're faced with the task of coming up with a reason for why you like something, you're certainly capable of giving a very plausible answer that feels true. Like, I like chocolate ice cream more than vanilla ice cream because chocolate was my mom's favorite ice cream flavor. That could be true, but your mom had a lot of favorite things. Do you share all of them with her? If not, then something being your mom's favorite isn't actually the reason that it's your favorite too. There's a deeper reason at play, one that you're probably not aware of. I would guess that the reason is very complex and not reducible to a single life experience. So while it could still provide useful information to ask people why they prefer dogs or cats, the reason that they give might not necessarily reflect the true reason. The true reason might be that dogs felt more like them than cats did. Or it might not be. Whatever the reason is, they're probably not conscious of it. So while the prediction that the theory makes is easy enough to test, the reason behind it is a little bit harder to test. Also, it's very possible that these correlations aren't universal. The people that I've asked are all Americans and almost all Wisconsinites. It might be that if you ask people from other countries or from vastly different cultures, that these correlations don't exist for them. Or they might go in the reverse direction, or they just might be weaker. In other words, this theory could be culture dependent. One interesting question to ask is, what happens when someone changes their mind? Does the correlation carry over through belief change? Would a change of heart in one case, say pet preference, accompany a change in heart in the other, say God belief, or vice versa? If you stop believing in God, do you begin to prefer dogs less or prefer cats more? I think the theory itself is agnostic on this point, because it could be that there's some underlying personality trait that determines the likelihood that you'll like dogs and believe in God. That underlying personality trait wouldn't necessarily have to change for you to change one of those other traits. An example of this sort of thing would be, you're genetically inclined to be obese, and you are obese. If you lose a bunch of weight and are no longer obese, you don't lose your genetic predisposition to be obese. You've just worked against it. My dog/God theory would say that you prefer dogs because you have certain traits in common with dogs, like looking for external sources of life direction. You could still be a person who has an inclination to look for external sources of life direction if you stop believing in God. That aspect of yourself might not change, or it might change despite your inherent disposition. It would just mean that you're more likely to believe in God and like dogs, but those two traits aren't intrinsically tied together. They're just probabilistically tied together. So after hearing all this, you might be thinking, okay, why does this matter? And I would say, I don't know, man. Maybe it doesn't. Unless you want a probabilistic way to find out if someone believes in God without directly asking them, then this most likely has no practical application for your life. It's just a theory that I think is interesting, if true. And honestly, you've definitely watched plenty of YouTube videos in the past that have had no practical application for your life. So thank you for watching this one. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give the video a like, leave a comment, perhaps by letting me know your answers to those two questions of pet preference and God belief, and subscribe to my channel to see more videos on strange topics such as this. As of right now, my channel doesn't really have one main focus. The videos I'm interested in making are about crackpot theories like this one and my multidimensional time video, atheism, philosophy, critical thinking and logic, ethics, Dungeons and Dragons, and veganism. Thank you for watching. Hope you found this interesting, and have a great day.